What's up everyone, this is eFlex and welcome back to another A Producer's Approach video. In today's video we're going to be looking at Tritonal and Codeko song Superhuman. So in these videos I have a basic structure I pretty much go by. So basically I start off the videos with a intro and personal backstory. Then after that I go into a breakdown and analysis section. And then after that I just go into an outro section, kind of summing up and wrapping up all my thoughts on the song. So in this video, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at Tritonal and Codeko song Superhuman. Basically, this is a more recent house song that just came out, and Tritonal is an artist group that I've been following for a while. Their progressive house over the years has stayed pretty consistent, which is pretty good to me because their style has pretty much stayed in more of that nostalgic progressive house kind of genre, which is really cool because you don't really hear much of that progressive house as much as you used to before. So back in the day, you know, when Tritonal released music, they were kind of the more, how would you say, kind of traditional kind of progressive house music for that time. So their style kind of blended with everyone else. But now that progressive house isn't really made in that old style, their music actually kind of stands out as being nostalgic to me, at least. And Codeko, in terms of an artist, I think I've heard of his music before. I don't know what song I've heard from him on the top of my head, but I know I've heard his name. But Tritonal, I know that group, and all the music they've released for progressive house wise have all been really good. And they've also dabbled with some other artists like Kill the Noise to make some like melodic dubstep. So they've definitely branched out into other genres, but progressive house is really where they shine, and their kind of nostalgic progressive house style is really, I guess, now more unique, because now that progressive house style is not as common as it used to be. So it's definitely something to always enjoy when you hear a nostalgic progressive house style. So this is Tritonal and Codeko's song Superhuman, and let's get into the video now. Alright, so that intro section kind of had like a ARP-ish kind of lead, and then kind of playing and kind of setting the tone of the song, and then there was kind of a little higher pitched little ARP playing in the background, like doo-doo-doo. But the main kind of ARP is kind of playing, setting the tone, along with this animated music video. And then after the kind of ARP comes in, then there's kind of like a transitionary noise, and then the vocal comes in along with kind of the pad that's going to be playing along with the vocal to kind of give it more fullness and timbre. So we'll continue now. So it's really cool. The piano sound is kind of what I thought a pad was, but it kind of almost mixes kind of as the pad and kind of piano sound. Like it kind of gives it kind of that ambient feeling, kind of fills the space in terms of playing the chords, and you kind of have the kind of ARP kind of playing still in the background along with the vocals singing. So far, in terms of the vocals, they aren't as reverb and delayed as, you know, the previous song All or Nothing. Those vocals kind of right off the bat, you could kind of tell they had a ton of like prominent like reverb and delay. But these vocals probably have some reverb and delay to, you know, fill in the mix, but it just doesn't seem as prominent as, you know, All or Nothing. So that's pretty interesting to note. But let's get back into the song. Alright, so that section there, the kick came in, and the percussion is really interesting because it's like a kick and kind of like a snare playing, but the snare kind of sounds like drumsticks kind of clapping together. I don't know, it's like really a soft sound, but it sounds like kind of clicking drumsticks. And then just with the vocal part there, it sounds like a duet with the vocalists and kind of how they paired the vocals, which is really cool because you don't really hear that too often in a song like this. Usually, like, you know, like Two Friends song Brighter, they had two separate vocalists, but like one vocalist kind of having a duet kind of vocals playing simultaneously with, like, I think the same vocalist's vocals is very interesting in terms of a vocal touch. So I don't know, that was a really cool vocal part that I just noticed. So definitely something really cool and something you don't hear too often. So let's get back into the mix.
Always looking for a sweet escape. Always looking for a new direction. Always searching for a brighter day. Thought we wanted life to be perfection. Hey, no.
Alright, so in this section you kind of notice that the percussion kind of faded out. It kind of stopped, and now it's pretty much pretty heavy on the pads and the vocals and the arp kind of playing to focus, like kind of building the emphasis mainly on the vocal and the pads. But in this section you kind of hear a dun, 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 kind of like a new introduced sound, almost like an arp sound kind of playing in the background to kind of give an extra timbre and have extra flow, since the percussion is not really in there, to add another sound kind of in the higher frequency range to give some more flow to this section, since there's no percussion, as I said. So definitely really interesting, and let's keep going with the song. Cool, so that was like a really cool transition. Like, it kind of sounded like, you know, it went from that vocal kind of piano pads playing, and then it went and then introduced kind of the new kind of synth sound playing, and then kind of introduced these snares to kind of build up this section into the build up. But it's kind of like a nice transitionary sound. They didn't use any percussion, they actually kind of used like a sound effect, almost like with the synth itself. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that was just kind of a notable transitionary sound that you don't normally hear in a lot of songs. Normally they use kind of like a percussion transitionary sound or transitionary percussion, but in this case they just kind of used the sound effect to transition with some, you know, other sound effects playing. But that was kind of a more unique kind of winding sound, so I never heard that in any other songs so far that I've heard. So definitely something interesting to note into the build-up section. Alright, so it's kind of interesting with that build-up section. There's kind of like a more traditional snare build-up, but there's kind of like a switch in between like two guitar instruments. There's this kind of like one guitar instrument playing in the beginning, and then it switches to the other one that goes doom 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 doom. It's kind of interesting how they switch between two different sounds like through the build-up. Not many songs do that, but maybe that transitionary guitar sound is kind of the introduction transitioning into the kind of drop section. But overall it's a more traditional build up, some white noise snare build up, the switching of the guitar sounds, and then there's kind of a breath of air, and then there's kind of like a, what I like to call is kind of a sub drop kind of section, goes doom, and then boom, and then the drop hits. So definitely something interesting to note, and then we'll let the drop play out, and then I'll kind of give my breakdown on the drop section. Alright, so in this drop section, the first part of the drop, you kind of hear the kick play, more of a traditional 4/4 beat, and there's not really much sub, and like the main part of this drop is super saws, which is a very traditional way in progressive house. Was made along, I want to say around 2013 to about like 2016. Like, it was mainly using a lot of super saws. There wasn't a lot of sub bass used, which isn't bad. It's just very kind of nostalgic to that style. And then the effects used within the drop is very similar to like Two Friends' song Brighter, which this song kind of gives me the same type of vibes as Brighter, with the effects used in the song, like kind of through the drop, kind of filtering out and kind of having gaps here and there. And then you kind of notice that the vocal isn't super present. It's actually like more in the foreground. You kind of hear the Superhuman vocal part kind of in the middle section of the drop, but then kind of has different harmonizing vocals way in the background throughout the drop. So the emphasis is really on that super saw chords in this section. So it's definitely interesting to note about that in this drop section. So far the percussion rhythm is in 4/4 and the emphasis is on the super saws, but you do kind of hear the vocals kind of reverb and delayed and lowered in volume way in the back in the foreground. So definitely something to note. So that part was cool, kind of after the first drop ends and then has kind of that ARP sound, and then pretty much immediately the piano chords kind of come in with the vocals, and then that kind of plays like the first part of the beginning intro break section. And then towards this part a little bit later on, there was kind of like a audio sound that goes like, it's kind of an interesting touch. I think it's kind of like a vocal chop section, kind of tuning the vocals and chopping them just to kind of give a different effect for the vocals and transitioning. Gives a little bit of an extra flow and a little different timbre in the mix. So that was a very interesting kind of vocal choppish sound that I've heard in a progressive sound house song. So you don't normally hear kind of vocal chops like that, so definitely something different. So that section is really cool. Like the first break section, there's kind of the kick that kind of comes in, and kind of within that part where the kick comes in, the vocalist, the way that the producers Tritonal and Codeko kind of layered the vocals, is almost like the vocalist is having a duet with himself, which is really cool. But I only noticed it within that sections where the kind of kick comes in for a little bit. So that's definitely really interesting. And then this part kind of gives emphasis on the chords and the vocals before the build up of the drop, before the second drop. So that's definitely interesting, and we'll look into that right now. Alright, so that section was pretty similar to, the previous kind of vocal kind of emphasis section in the break. kind of has an emphasis on the vocal and the piano progression and has that art playing in the background. But this section here in the build-up, the vocal kind of changes, where the vocalist has harmonizing vocals kind of with the build-up. And yeah, I'll talk more about that before the second drop happens. Alright, so I noticed in this build up there's more claps included, the harmonizing vocals are included, and then there's not really a switch in the guitar sound like there was in the first build up into the drop. There kind of is a guitar sound playing, kind of that doom 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 doom, but it doesn't switch between two different guitar sounds from what I heard. Since, there's kind of the layering of the harmonizing vocals in the build-up, as well as, the more traditional standard snare build-up with the white noise riser attached to it, but that's just a different vocal included, and then just something interesting to note there. So, definitely a little variation between both build-ups, so we'll get into the second drop now. Alright, so in this second drop section, the first part of the second drop was pretty similar to the first part of the first drop, but the second part of the second drop is more interesting. Reminds me a lot of the Two Friends song Brighter, where they kind of switched it up and did like a halftime type drop, where the section, the rhythm itself becomes a little bit slower, and to me reminds me of like a dubstep almost like section where it's halftime and you kind of throw in some wubbing sounds kind of in between the end of phrases. So definitely reminds me of Two Friends songs Brighter there, in terms of like the halftime switch up section there. So overall, let's just listen to the outro of the song now. So the vocals pretty much play out in the outro, and they kind of sing out the kind of the hook section for the vocals of the Superhuman, and it kind of is in a lower pitch, and it sounds like they kind of throw a high pass filter on there to kind of a high pass filter to take out some of the lows. Or they kind of EQ'd out kind of the low end just to kind of making the vocal sound a little bit thinner. But overall, this song definitely has the Two Friends Brighter vibe, has that really nostalgic kind of progressive house feel, has a lot of emphasis on the saw waves and the saw chords when it drops. There isn't much sub bass, but the emphasis is really on those saw wave chords, which is a really huge kind of callback to like 2014, 2015 progressive house, which is not bad. I really like it, but it's a very, particular style to be going for, and as a style of progressive house you don't really hear much anymore of. So overall, I really like the song. For a more recent, 2021 progressive house song, like you normally don't hear a song in this nature. This is something you would have heard in like 2014. So for me, it's really nice to hear these songs 2014 style in 2021. So overall, I hope you guys like the video. Check out Tritonal and Codeko if you guys want to. Tritonal stuff for sure is really good. And if you like or dislike the video, leave a comment. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something. So overall, hope you guys look forward to more of my videos in the future. I plan to be switching up my release schedule to more of a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday in this new year of 2022. So definitely be on the lookout for that type of release schedule. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and have a good one. Peace.